There's something special about the space between one year and the next. It's like standing in a doorway, 1 foot in what was, 1 foot in what's coming. For just a moment, everything pauses. And in that pause, there's an opportunity. Not to make resolutions or promises you'll break by February, but to remember something most of us forget in the rush of daily life. The present moment is the only place peace has ever lived. Tonight, we're going to explore that space together, through ancient Buddhist wisdom, stories that make you smile, and a practice so simple you'll wonder why no one taught you this years ago. This isn't a lecture. Think of it as 3 hours with a wise friend, sharing tea and talking about what really matters. By the end, you'll understand why letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means coming home to yourself. The Buddha taught that suffering comes from clinging to what was and grasping at what might be. Freedom comes from learning to rest in what is. So, if it feels right, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. Maybe grab a blanket, find a quiet corner, or simply settle in wherever you are. For the next 3 hours, we're going to slow down together. Let's begin. I want to tell you about something I've noticed over the years. Something that happens when people first discover meditation, first encounter Buddhist teachings, first decide they want to cultivate inner peace. They become very, very serious. Their faces change. Their voices drop. They start moving through the world like they're trying not to disturb something fragile and invisible. They think this is what it means to be spiritual, to be peaceful, to be awake. And I understand why. When you look at images of the Buddha, he's sitting so still, so composed, so seemingly beyond the chaos of ordinary life. It's easy to think that's what you're aiming for, that kind of marble statue calm. But here's what those images don't show you. The Buddha walked dusty roads in the blazing heat of India. He ate meals with his hands, sitting on the ground with his students. He told stories, asked questions, sometimes used humor to make a point land. He was fully, completely, magnificently alive. Not alive in the way we usually think of it, rushing, striving, consuming, performing, but alive in the way a tree is alive, responding to sunlight, bending in wind, dropping leaves when the season changes. Present, flexible, real. There's a teaching in Buddhism about the middle way. The Buddha discovered it early in his practice, when he was trying to achieve enlightenment through extreme asceticism. He barely ate. He barely slept. He pushed his body to the very edge of what it could endure, thinking that suffering would purify him, that denial would lead to awakening. And you know what he discovered? It didn't work. Starving himself didn't make him enlightened. It just made him weak. Denying his humanity didn't transcend it. It just made him less able to see clearly. So he sat down, accepted a bowl of rice milk from a young woman, and ate. And his fellow ascetics, the ones who'd been practicing alongside him, admiring his discipline, they were horrified. They thought he'd given up. They thought he'd failed. But he hadn't failed. He'd understood something crucial. The path to freedom isn't about crushing your humanity. It's about understanding it so deeply that you stop fighting with it. I think about this whenever I see someone trying too hard to be peaceful, trying to force themselves into some image of what a spiritual person should look like. They hold their breath without realizing it. They tighten their shoulders while trying to relax. They're so busy monitoring themselves for signs of enlightenment that they miss the actual moment they're living in. This is what I call spiritual perfectionism. It's the belief that peace is something you earn through flawless behavior, that you have to be calm enough, mindful enough, evolved enough before you're allowed to rest. And it's exhausting, because you're not trying to understand yourself. You're trying to become someone else. Someone who never gets angry, never feels anxious, never has a petty thought or a moment of impatience. Someone who, frankly, doesn't exist. The Buddha said something beautiful about this. He said, "If we could see the miracle of a single flower clearly, our whole life would change." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, "If we could become like a flower," or "if we could transcend the flower." He said, "If we could see it clearly." Seeing clearly means seeing things as they actually are, not as you wish they were, not as you think they should be, but as they are, right now, in this moment. And when you look at a flower clearly, you don't see perfection. You see petals with brown edges. You see stems that bend. You see beauty that's already beginning to fade, even as it blooms. That's the miracle. Not that it's perfect, but that it's exactly what it is. The same is true for you. You are exactly what you are. Not perfect, not finished, not beyond emotion or confusion, or the occasional ridiculous mistake. And that's not a problem to be solved. That's just what being human means. I want you to imagine something with me for a moment. Imagine a child discovering snow for the first time, not thinking about snow, not analyzing it, not trying to have the correct spiritual response to snow, just standing there with their mouth open, watching it fall. That's presence. That's what the Buddha was pointing to when he talked about seeing clearly, not some elevated state where you're above ordinary experience, but a quality of attention where you're so fully here that there's no room for self-judgment, no room for the voice that says, "Am I doing this right?" Children haven't learned yet to split themselves in two, the one who experiences and the one who watches and judges the experience. They're just here, completely, unself-consciously here. And then we grow up. We learn to monitor ourselves. We learn to compare ourselves to others. We learn that there's a right way to be, and we might not be doing it correctly. And by the time we come to meditation, to Buddhist practice, to teachings about peace, we bring all of that with us. All that self-monitoring, all that comparison, all that fear of doing it wrong. So we sit down to meditate and immediately start grading ourselves. My mind is too busy. I'm not calm enough. Other people are probably better at this. I should be feeling more peaceful by now. And the whole time, we're missing the point. The point isn't to become someone who never has a busy mind. The point is to notice the busy mind without adding a second layer of suffering about having a busy mind. To see clearly means to see, mind is busy right now, without the story, and that means I'm failing. This is permission. Permission to be exactly where you are. Permission to have the experience you're having. Permission to be imperfect, confused, still figuring it out. Because here's what nobody tells you about spiritual practice. The peace you're looking for isn't on the other side of perfection. It's on the other side of acceptance. Not acceptance in the sense of resignation or giving up, but acceptance in the sense of seeing clearly what is true right now and not going to war with it. Let me give you an example. There's a kind of tree called a bristlecone pine. Some of them are over 4,000 years old, the oldest living things on Earth. And you know what they look like? Twisted, gnarled, bent by thousands of years of wind and weather, half-dead wood, mixed with living wood, branches going in directions that make no sense from a design perspective. They're not beautiful in the way a young tree in perfect conditions is beautiful. They're beautiful in a completely different way. They're beautiful because they survived, because they adapted, because they bent instead of breaking, because they kept growing even when conditions were impossible. You are like that tree. Every difficulty you faced has shaped you. Every time life pushed you in a direction you didn't want to go, you adapted. You're still here, still growing, still reaching toward light, even when the wind is trying to push you over. And the twisted parts, the bent parts, the places where you're not smooth and symmetrical, those aren't failures. Those are the proof that you're alive. A plastic tree never changes. A fake tree never bends. Only living things show the marks of having actually lived. So when you come to Buddhist practice, you don't need to become a different kind of tree. You don't need to straighten out all your crooked branches or hide the places where life left scars. You just need to stop pretending you're plastic. Stop trying to look like the perfect meditation poster. Stop trying to be the person who has it all figured out. Stop trying to transcend your humanity and just be human, fully, completely, without apology. This is what the Buddha meant by the middle way. Not halfway between extremes, but the path that honors what's actually true. You need food, so eat. You need rest, so sleep. You need connection, so reach out. You need solitude, so step back. You're not trying to escape being human. You're trying to be human with clarity, with kindness, with awareness of what's actually happening, instead of being lost in stories about what should be happening. And yes, that includes joy. That includes laughter. That includes lightness and playfulness, and the ability to not take everything so seriously all the time. Because life is already serious enough. There's already plenty of weight, plenty of difficulty, plenty of genuine suffering in the world. You don't need to add the extra weight of pretending you're beyond it all. One of my favorite teachings in Buddhism is about the nature of suffering itself. The Buddha said there are two kinds of arrows. The first arrow is pain. It's unavoidable. You get sick. You lose someone you love. You fail at something important. You experience physical or emotional pain. That's the first arrow, and it's just part of being alive. The second arrow is the suffering we add to the pain. The story we tell about what the pain means. The judgment we add on top of the experience. I shouldn't feel this way. Other people handle this better than I do. If I were more spiritual, this wouldn't bother me. I should be over this by now. That's the second arrow, and that's the one we have some choice about. You can't always avoid the first arrow. Life will be life, unpredictable, sometimes painful, occasionally heartbreaking. But you can learn to see when you're shooting the second arrow at yourself, when you're adding suffering on top of pain because you think you shouldn't be feeling what you're feeling. And one of the ways you stop shooting that second arrow is by giving yourself permission to be exactly who you are. To be tired when you're tired. To be sad when you're sad. To be confused when you're confused. To be joyful when you're joyful. To laugh when something is funny, even if you're supposed to be being spiritual. There's a teaching that says, enlightenment isn't about adding something you don't have. It's about subtracting what was never yours to begin with. All the ideas about who you should be, all the images of spiritual perfection you're trying to live up to, all the ways you've been told you're not enough, exactly as you are. Those aren't truth. They're just thoughts, just conditioning, just clouds passing through the sky. And underneath all of that, you. Imperfect, alive, completely worthy of peace, exactly as you are in this moment. So if you've been holding your breath, trying to be good enough for Buddhist practice, you can let it go now. If you've been monitoring every thought, every emotion, every reaction, trying to catch yourself being unspiritual, you can stop. The practice isn't about becoming flawless. It's about becoming aware. And awareness includes everything: the beautiful and the broken, the peaceful and the chaotic, the moments you get it right and the moments you miss completely. All of it belongs. All of it is workable. All of it is part of the path. The Buddha spent his entire teaching career making this point in 1,000 different ways. He spoke to murderers and kings, to householders and monastics, to people who had everything together and people who were completely falling apart. And the message was always the same. There's a path through suffering, and you don't have to be perfect to walk it. You just have to be willing to look clearly, willing to be honest about what you're experiencing, willing to meet yourself with kindness instead of judgment. That's the permission I'm offering you today. Permission to be human, to be alive, to be exactly where you are on the path without needing to pretend you're somewhere else. Because here's the truth. Peace doesn't come from transcending your humanity. It comes from embracing your humanity with such clear seeing, such deep kindness, that there's nothing left to fight against. And when you stop fighting with who you are, something remarkable happens. You have energy for other things. You have attention for what actually matters. You stop being so exhausted by the effort of trying to be someone you're not. And in that space, that relaxed, honest, fully alive space, peace finds you. Not because you earned it, not because you became perfect, but because you finally stopped running from yourself long enough to notice that peace was here all along. So take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let your face relax. Let yourself be exactly as you are in this moment, without adding any extra layer of should or shouldn't. This is enough. You are enough. And everything that's about to unfold in these next hours together, it's all built on this foundation, this simple, radical permission to be alive. The Buddha once taught his students about the nature of human perception. He said that when an untrained mind encounters experience, it immediately begins to proliferate thoughts around that experience. One moment of contact becomes 10 thoughts, then 100, then 1,000, most of them focused on what's wrong, what's missing, what needs to be fixed or feared. He called this papanyanka, mental proliferation, the mind's tendency to spin simple experiences into complex stories of suffering. And he taught that this proliferation follows predictable patterns. The untrained mind naturally moves toward aversion, toward seeing problems, toward focusing on what it doesn't want rather than what it has. This isn't because humans are fundamentally negative. It's because the mind developed as a survival tool, and survival required constant vigilance for threats. But survival and peace are not the same thing. The mind that kept humans alive by scanning for danger is the same mind that now scans a perfectly safe moment and finds 30 things to worry about. The mechanism that once protected from predators now creates suffering by treating uncomfortable emotions, awkward social moments, and minor disappointments as threats to survival. And so people live in a constant state of bracing against problems, most of which exist only in thought. There's a teaching in the Dhammapada, one of the oldest Buddhist texts, that speaks to this directly. It says, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world." Not that thoughts create reality in some magical sense, but that the quality of attention shapes the quality of experience. If attention is trained to find problems, life becomes a series of problems. If attention is trained to notice the full picture, problems alongside everything else, life becomes workable in a way it never was before. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Imagine someone building a wall. They spend days laying bricks, one after another, mixing mortar, checking levels, making sure everything is aligned properly. It's slow, careful work, and after several days, the wall is finished. 1,000 bricks, laid with attention and care. But when the builder steps back to look at what they've created, they don't see 1,000 bricks. They see 2 bricks that are slightly crooked. 2 bricks out of 1,000. And suddenly, those 2 bricks become the entire wall. They're all the builder can see, all they can think about. The 998 bricks that are perfectly placed, they become invisible. The hours of skilled work, the care taken, the achievement of building something solid and useful, all of that disappears. There are only the 2 bad bricks. And in the mind of the builder, those 2 bricks are evidence of failure, proof that they're not good enough, reason to tear the whole thing down and start over. This is not an exaggeration of how the untrained mind works. This is exactly how it works. The Buddha taught about this pattern in many ways throughout his life. He called it wrong view, not seeing things as they actually are, but seeing them through the filter of aversion, through the lens of what's missing or broken. He said that wrong view is the root of suffering, not because reality itself is inherently painful, but because wrong view creates a painful relationship with reality. Right view, by contrast, sees things clearly. It doesn't deny the 2 crooked bricks. They're there, they're real, but it also doesn't pretend they're the whole wall. Right view sees 998 good bricks and 2 crooked ones. Both are true. Both are part of the picture. And suddenly, with that shift in seeing, the wall doesn't need to be destroyed. It's actually quite beautiful, strong, useful, with a bit of character in its imperfection. The Buddha told a story about 2 monks walking together on a journey. They came to a river that had flooded, making the usual crossing point dangerous. A young woman stood at the bank, afraid to cross, and asked if one of the monks could help her. The first monk was bound by strict rules about not touching women, so he said nothing and began looking for another way across. But the second monk simply picked up the woman, carried her across the flooded river, set her down safely on the other side, and continued walking. For hours afterward, the first monk was agitated. He kept bringing up the incident, questioning whether the second monk had broken his vows, whether the action was appropriate, whether it would lead to spiritual harm. Finally, the second monk stopped walking and turned to his companion. He said, "I put that woman down hours ago at the river. Why are you still carrying her?" This is what the mind does with mistakes, with imperfections. With anything, it judges as wrong. It picks them up and carries them long after the moment has passed. It revisits them, analyzes them, builds entire stories around them about what they mean and what they prove. And in the carrying, in the constant revisiting, what was a simple moment becomes a burden that weighs down every future moment. The Buddha taught that nothing in life is permanent. Everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming, never fixed, never finished, always in motion. This teaching is usually understood as pointing to impermanence, to the truth that everything eventually ends. But it also points to something else. It points to the fact that nothing is solid in the way we think it is. That wall with the 2 crooked bricks? It's not a permanent statement about the builder's worth or skill. It's a wall that was built on a particular day, under particular conditions, by a person learning as they worked. The crooked bricks aren't failures. They're just 2 moments where the hand moved differently than the builder intended. Nothing more, nothing less. But the mind wants to make meaning out of everything. It wants evidence about who you are, proof of your worth, predictions about your future. And so it takes 2 crooked bricks and builds an entire identity around them. This is suffering that doesn't need to exist. In some Buddhist traditions, there's a teaching about features versus flaws. When something is made by hand, a piece of pottery, a woven cloth, a built structure, there are always irregularities. Places where the glaze pooled slightly thicker, where the weave shifted, where the wood grain went an unexpected direction. Mass-produced objects are uniform, perfect in their sameness, interchangeable with every other object from the same factory. But handmade things carry the marks of their making, and those marks are what make them valuable, what prove they're real, that someone's hands shaped them, that they have a history. The irregularities aren't flaws to be hidden or apologized for. They're features that make the object unique. The same is true for human lives. Lives that look perfect from the outside are usually lives where someone learned to hide the irregular parts, to present only what's acceptable, to pretend there's something mass-produced rather than something made by hand. But lives that are actually lived, really lived, with risk and effort and learning through failure, those lives have crooked bricks. They have places where the hand slipped, where the intention didn't quite meet the execution, where the result wasn't what was planned. And those places are proof that a life was actually lived, not just performed. The question isn't whether you'll have crooked bricks. You will. Everyone does. The question is what you'll make them mean. Will they be evidence of failure? Proof that you should tear everything down and hide from future attempts? Or will they be features, marks of having actually tried, of being human, of learning through the only way learning actually happens, by doing things imperfectly until slowly, gradually, you get better at them? The Buddha taught his students to investigate their own minds, to watch thoughts arise and pass, to notice patterns without being controlled by them. And one of the most important patterns to notice is this one: the tendency to focus on what's wrong while barely registering what's right. Not to judge the pattern or make it mean something about you, but simply to see it clearly. Because once you see it, you have a choice. You can continue letting the mind's automatic focus on problems run your life, or you can train attention differently. This training isn't about forcing positive thoughts or pretending problems don't exist. It's about accuracy, about seeing the whole picture instead of only the part the mind has been conditioned to magnify. There's a practice some Buddhist teachers recommend for training this kind of attention. At the end of each day, before sleep, spend a few minutes reviewing what happened. Not in a judgmental way, not cataloguing mistakes, but simply noticing. What went well today? What small kindness was offered or received? What moment of connection occurred? What task was completed? What difficulty was moved through without adding extra suffering to it? The mind will resist this practice at first. It will want to skip over the good moments as insignificant and zoom in on the problems. That's normal. That's what untrained attention does. But with patient, repeated effort, attention begins to shift. It becomes possible to hold both, the difficult and the good, the mistakes and the achievements, the 2 crooked bricks and the 998 straight ones. This isn't gratitude practice in the forced sense, where you have to feel thankful for things you don't actually feel thankful for. It's just accurate accounting. What actually happened today? All of it, not just the parts that hurt or worried or disappointed. The Buddha said that wrong view creates suffering and right view leads to freedom. This is one of the clearest examples of what that means in daily life. Wrong view looks at your life and sees only problems, only insufficiency, only evidence that you're not enough and never will be. Right view looks at the same life and sees the whole truth. Yes, there are difficulties, and also there is so much that's working, so much that's been built, so much evidence of resilience and care and ongoing effort. Same life, same facts, completely different relationship to those facts. And that relationship is what determines whether you spend your years at war with yourself or at peace with the reality of being human. Now, there's something important to understand about this teaching. It's not asking you to deny real difficulty. It's not asking you to pretend that hard things aren't hard, or that pain isn't painful. The Buddha was very clear about this. He taught that life includes suffering. That's the first noble truth. Not pessimism, but honest acknowledgement. Pain happens. Loss happens. Sickness, aging, death. These are not optional parts of human existence. The 2 bad bricks philosophy isn't about denying those bricks exist. It's about not letting them become the only bricks you can see. There's a difference between acknowledging difficulty and being consumed by it. Between saying, "This is hard," and saying, "Everything is hard, nothing works. My life is defined by hardship." The first statement is accurate. The second is the mind's proliferation, its tendency to take one difficult truth and expand it until it becomes the entire truth. In nature, when a tree falls in a forest, it doesn't disappear. It becomes something else. It creates an opening in the canopy where light can reach the forest floor. That light allows new seedlings to grow that couldn't grow in the shade of the standing tree. The fallen tree becomes habitat for insects, for fungi, for small creatures who make homes in its decomposing wood. It becomes nutrients returning to the soil, feeding the roots of trees still standing. The falling isn't failure. It's part of a larger cycle where nothing is wasted, where everything serves a purpose, where death feeds life in an endless exchange. Your difficulties work the same way. When something falls apart in your life, it's painful, no question. There's real grief, real loss, real adjustment required. But if you can hold the falling alongside everything else that's true, something becomes visible that you couldn't see when you were focused only on the loss. You see what becomes possible because of the space the falling created. You see what you learned through moving through difficulty. You see strength you didn't know you had because you'd never been tested in that particular way. The Buddha taught about this in terms of dependent origination, the way everything arises in relationship to conditions, the way nothing exists in isolation. What looks like an ending when you zoom in close is actually a transition when you zoom out. What looks like pure loss when you focus only on what's gone becomes transformation when you notice what's becoming possible. This doesn't make the loss not hurt. It doesn't mean you shouldn't grieve what's gone, but it means you're not trapped by the story that loss can only ever mean loss. Sometimes loss also means liberation. Sometimes failure also means learning. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happened becomes the thing that changed your life in ways you now can't imagine being without. You don't know yet, and the not knowing is part of being alive. The Buddha talked about fear in a teaching that's relevant here. He said that the mind creates suffering through craving and aversion. Craving wants things to be different than they are. Aversion wants things to be different than they are. Both are forms of resistance to reality as it actually exists right now. And that resistance creates a particular kind of suffering, the suffering of being at war with what is. When you're afraid of failure, that fear often creates the conditions for failure, not through mystical attraction, but through the practical effects of fear on behavior. Fear makes you tentative, makes you hold back, makes you so focused on not making mistakes that you can't move freely. And that tension, that holding back, often produces exactly the result you were trying to avoid. But when you orient toward possibility instead of fear, not naive optimism, but genuine openness to what might unfold, you move differently through life. You take risks that feel right, even though you might fail. You show up fully, even though you might be rejected. You try things you're not yet good at, because that's the only path to becoming good at them. And sometimes you do fail. Sometimes you are rejected. Sometimes you're terrible at the thing you're trying. But you're also alive in a way that fear makes impossible. There's a teaching about investigation that's useful here. Most people, when something goes wrong, investigate exhaustively. They analyze what they did wrong, whose fault it was, how to prevent it from happening again. They become experts in what doesn't work. But when something goes right, they barely notice. They chalk it up to luck or accident and move on without learning anything from it. The Buddha encouraged a different approach. He said to investigate causes and conditions for both suffering and happiness. When you have a day where peace showed up, where connection happened, where things flowed more easily than usual, stop and notice. What created those conditions? What did you do differently? What can you learn from what worked? This isn't about replicating the exact circumstances, because conditions are always changing. It's about becoming someone who studies success as carefully as you study failure. Because if you only study what goes wrong, you only learn how to avoid mistakes. But if you study what goes right, you learn how to create conditions for things to go right more often. And slowly, your life shifts from being organized around avoiding the 2 bad bricks to being organized around creating more of the 998 good ones. This is the practice the Buddha was pointing toward throughout all his teachings. Not transcending your humanity, not becoming someone who never makes mistakes or never experiences difficulty, but training attention to see clearly, to hold the whole picture, to respond to life from wisdom instead of from the mind's automatic patterns of aversion. It's simple in concept, extraordinarily difficult in practice, because the patterns run deep. But possible, absolutely possible. One moment of clear seeing at a time, one conscious choice to widen the lens instead of narrowing it. One practice of noticing what's actually here instead of only what's missing. That's how the wall stops being defined by 2 crooked bricks. That's how your life stops being defined by its imperfections and becomes visible as the remarkable, ongoing, completely workable thing it actually is. 998 bricks that are straight and true, 2 that are crooked, both part of the picture, both real. And when you can see both without making the crooked ones more important than they are, something extraordinary happens. You realize the wall is actually beautiful. Your life is actually beautiful. Not in spite of its imperfections, but including them. Complete as you are right now. There's something you've been carrying with you into this moment, and it has nothing to do with what's in your hands. It's invisible, but if you pay attention, you can feel it. A tightness across your shoulders, a heaviness in your chest, a background hum of exhaustion that's always there, even after a full night's sleep. This is what it feels like to carry time. Not the present moment. This moment is actually quite light, quite manageable, if you're simply here with it. But most of us aren't simply here. We're dragging the past behind us and holding the future out in front, like a shield we hope will protect us from uncertainty. And between these 2 enormous weights, the actual moment we're living in gets crushed almost into nothing. The Buddha taught that human beings have a unique capacity among all creatures. We can mentally transport ourselves out of the present moment. We can revisit the past, rehearse the future, live entire lives in our imagination while our bodies sit still in a chair. This capacity is what allowed humans to plan, to learn from mistakes, to build civilizations. It's an extraordinary gift, but it's also the source of almost all our suffering. Because somewhere along the way, we forgot how to come back. We forgot that the past and future are useful tools, not places to live. We started carrying them everywhere, dragging them into every moment, until the weight became so normal, we stopped noticing it was there. Let me ask you something. Right now, in this actual present moment, not in your thoughts about other moments, but right here where you are, is there a problem that needs to be solved in the next 60 seconds? For most people listening to this, the answer is no. Your heart is beating without you having to think about it. Your lungs are breathing. You're safe enough to be listening to these words. Whatever's happening right now, in this slice of time that actually exists, you're managing it. The problems are almost all in your relationship with time. They're in the memory of something that already happened and can't be changed. They're in the projection of something that hasn't happened yet and might never happen. They're in the story you're telling about what the past means and what the future will bring. But here, now, in this moment, you're okay. And yet most of us don't feel okay because we're not really here. We're somewhere else entirely, carrying moments that don't exist anymore or don't exist yet, and wondering why we're so tired. Think about people in waiting rooms, airports, hospitals, anywhere people have unstructured time. Watch their faces, their bodies. Most aren't resting even though they're sitting still. They're tensed against something that isn't happening right now. They're replaying something that already happened. They're rehearsing something that might happen. Their bodies are in the waiting room, but they're living in a different time entirely. And because they're not here, they miss the rare gift of having nowhere they need to be, nothing they need to do, permission to simply exist for a few minutes without producing anything. The weight of the past is different from the weight of the future. The past sits on your back, on your shoulders. It's what makes people hunch forward, what makes necks ache, what makes us feel decades older than our years. It's every regret still being carried, every disappointment never released, every version of yourself you wanted to become but didn't, every relationship that ended badly, every choice you wish you could unmake. We accumulate it year after year, and the burden gets heavier. The future is different. The future presses on your chest, makes it hard to breathe deeply. It's the anxiety about things that haven't happened, the worry that you won't be enough, won't have enough, won't do enough. The plans you're terrified will fall apart. The disasters you're trying to prevent through constant vigilance. And here's what's remarkable. Most of what you're worried about will never happen. Studies show that roughly 90% of what people worry about never comes to pass. Most of the catastrophes being rehearsed will never arrive. Most of the worst-case scenarios being prepared for will never unfold. But people will spend years, sometimes entire lifetimes, bracing for things that never come. Years of shallow breathing, years of tension held in the chest, years of missing what's actually happening because they're so focused on what might happen. The Buddha taught that we suffer not just from what happens, but from our relationship with what happens. Pain is unavoidable, That's the first noble truth. But suffering is what we add to pain, through our stories about it, through our resistance to it, through carrying it forward into every future moment. The past happened, that's factual. But the story about what the past means, about what it says about you, about how it defines your future, that's optional. The future will come. That's also factual. But the story about all the terrible things that might happen, about your inability to handle whatever comes, about needing to control outcomes you can't control, that's optional too. And those optional stories are what make the weight unbearable. Now, I want to acknowledge something important here. There are real reasons people carry the past. Trauma isn't just a story. It changes the nervous system, changes how the brain processes safety and threat. Grief isn't something you can just decide to put down. Loss is real. And there are real reasons people carry anxiety about the future. Uncertainty is genuinely uncomfortable for human nervous systems. Planning is how humans survived as a species. Some level of preparation is wisdom, not pathology. I'm not suggesting you just drop all concern for past and future and float blissfully in some eternal now. What I'm pointing to is the difference between using the past and future as tools versus being used by them. Between carrying what's necessary and carrying what's crushing you. Between learning from what happened and being imprisoned by it. Between preparing for what might come and living as though it's already happened. There's a Buddhist teaching about traveling light through life. The Buddha and his monks were wanderers for much of the year. They walked from village to village, teaching, begging for food, sleeping under trees, and they carried very little: a robe, a bowl, basic necessities. Not because possessions were evil, but because carrying too much made it impossible to move freely. If you're carrying everything you might possibly need for every possible situation, you can't walk very far. The weight makes you slow, makes you tired, makes every step harder than it needs to be. And eventually, you stop moving altogether. You set up camp around your pile of possessions and defend it instead of continuing the journey. The same is true for mental and emotional weight. If you're carrying every hurt from your past and every fear about your future, you can't move freely through the present moment. You're too burdened, too slow, too defended against possibilities, because you're trying to protect yourself from old wounds or anticipated ones. So what does it mean to travel light? It means carrying only what's useful right now, taking what you've learned from the past, without taking the past itself, preparing reasonably for the future, without trying to control or predict every possible outcome. It means knowing the difference between memory and rumination, between planning and worrying, between wisdom and burden. And here's something that might surprise you. Traveling light doesn't make you unprepared for difficulty. It makes you more prepared. Because when difficulty comes, you have energy to meet it. You're not already exhausted from carrying unnecessary weight. You can respond to what's actually happening instead of reacting from old wounds or imagined futures. There's a story about a Zen student who asked their teacher about death. The student was terrified of dying, spent hours lying awake imagining it, trying to prepare for it, trying to make peace with it. The teacher asked, "When you die, will you be thinking about dying?" The student was confused. Of course, they would be thinking about dying. They were dying. But the teacher said, "No. When you're actually dying, you'll be doing whatever dying feels like in that moment. You'll be breathing or not breathing. You'll be feeling sensations in your body. You'll be present with what's actually happening. Right now, you're not dying. You're thinking about dying. And that thinking is creating suffering that doesn't need to exist yet, and might never need to exist in the way you're imagining it." The student said, "But shouldn't I prepare?" And the teacher said, "Yes, prepare by learning to be present with what's actually happening right now, because death will be another now. And if you've never practiced being present with the nows you're already in, what makes you think you'll suddenly know how when you're dying?" This is the practice. Not avoiding thoughts of past or future, but noticing when you're lost in them. Noticing when you've left the present moment and are living in a memory or a projection. And then, gently, coming back. Not because the present moment is always pleasant, sometimes it's not, but because it's the only moment you can actually work with. The only moment where peace is available. The only moment where you have any real agency. The Buddha taught about 3 qualities that make life worth living, 3 things worth honoring, worth remembering, worth organizing your life around. The first is virtue. Not virtue in some moralistic sense, but virtue as living in a way you can be proud of, as being someone others can trust, as creating safety in the world instead of harm. When you live with integrity, when your actions align with your values, something relaxes in you. You're not carrying the weight of guilt or shame. You're not worried about being found out, about mask slipping, about the gap between who you present as and who you actually are. That's a kind of lightness. Imagine living in a community where everyone could be trusted completely, where you could leave your door unlocked, your belongings unguarded, your heart undefended, because you knew no one would harm you. That's not naive fantasy. That's what virtue creates. Not perfect people, but trustworthy ones. People who keep their word. People who clean up their messes. People who show up. And when you are that kind of person, you don't have to carry the weight of your own untrustworthiness. The second quality is peace. Not peace as the absence of conflict, but peace as a quality of presence, as the ability to be still inside even when life is moving quickly around you. This is what meditation trains. Not the ability to empty your mind or transcend your humanness, but the ability to be present with whatever's arising without adding extra suffering to it. When you can sit with discomfort without needing to escape it immediately, something changes. When you can feel difficult emotions without believing they'll destroy you, you stop being at war with your own experience. And that internal war is exhausting. Peace doesn't mean nothing bothers you. It means you have the capacity to be with what bothers you, without fragmenting, without needing to fix it immediately, without adding panic to pain. The third quality is compassion joined with wisdom. Compassion alone can exhaust you if you're taking on everyone's suffering as your own. Wisdom alone can become cold if it's not connected to care. But together, they create something sustainable. Wisdom sees clearly what's actually happening and what's helpful. Compassion ensures that the seeing and the helping come from a place of genuine care, not obligation or performance. When someone is stranded on the side of the road in the early morning and you stop to help, not because you'll get something from it, but because it's the obvious thing to do, that's compassion and wisdom working together. When you see suffering and can respond without drowning in it, without making it about you, without needing to be seen as helpful, that's the balance. These three qualities, virtue, peace, and compassion with wisdom, they're not decorative. They're not extra spiritual practices you add on top of regular life. They're the foundation of a life that doesn't crush you with its own weight. Because when you're living with integrity, you're not carrying shame. When you're cultivating peace, you're not constantly at war with reality. When you're responding with wisdom and compassion, you're not carrying the isolation of being disconnected from others' humanity. In some Buddhist traditions, practitioners bow to these qualities, not as worship, but as remembering. Each bow is a reminder of what matters, what's worth organizing your life around, what's worth coming back to when you get lost. And you do get lost. Everyone does. You get caught up in the weight of what you're carrying. You forget that you can put it down. You forget that peace is possible. That's when you bow, not literally, necessarily, but in whatever gesture brings you back. The gesture that says, I remember what matters. I remember that virtue creates safety. I remember that peace is available. I remember that wisdom and compassion are possible even here, even now, even with all this difficulty. The Buddha said something beautiful about this. He said, radiate boundless love towards the entire world. Not bounded love, love that extends only to people like you, people who've earned it, people who are easy to love, but boundless love, love without edges, without conditions, without keeping track of who deserves it. That sounds impossible, doesn't it? And maybe it is impossible to maintain constantly. Maybe it's something you touch for a moment and then lose and then find again. But the instruction itself is the practice to keep radiating, keep extending, keep softening the boundaries between your heart and the world. Not because it makes you a good person, but because it makes you lighter. Because love, real love, isn't a burden. Resentment is a burden. Hatred is a burden. Indifference is a burden. But love, even love that includes grief and difficulty, love creates space instead of taking it up. So here's where we are. You've been carrying weight you didn't know you were carrying. The weight of time, of past and future, of stories about who you are and what your life means. And there are 3 things worth remembering when the weight gets too heavy. Virtue that creates safety, peace that creates steadiness, compassion and wisdom that create connection. These aren't things you achieve once and then have forever. They're practices, things you remember and forget and remember again. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to guide you through a practice of actually putting down what you're carrying. Not forever, not in some permanent way, but just for a little while. Long enough to remember what it feels like to stand without all that weight on your shoulders and chest. Long enough to notice that the present moment, when you're actually in it, is manageable in a way that the weight of all time never is. So stay with me. We're about to arrive at the heart of this practice. The place where you put everything down and discover what's been here all along, waiting for you to notice it. We've arrived at the heart of this practice. Everything we've explored so far, the permission to be human, the teaching about where we place our attention, the weight of carrying time, all of it has been preparing you for this moment. What you're about to experience is both ancient and immediate. The Buddha taught this practice in different forms throughout his life, and it's been passed down through generations of practitioners who found freedom through it. But it's not something you understand intellectually. It's something you experience directly, in your body, in this moment. In just a few minutes, I'm going to guide you through a meditation that will show you how to put down what you've been carrying. Not through force or willpower, not by pretending the past and future don't matter, but by remembering that you don't have to hold them all the time. You can set them down. You can rest. You can stand in the present moment and remember what it feels like to simply be here without the weight of all time on your shoulders. There's something sacred about thresholds. The moment between one year and the next. The space between sleeping and waking. The pause between one breath ending and the next beginning. These are the places where transformation becomes possible. Not because time itself is different in these moments, but because thresholds remind us that everything is always in transition. Nothing is as fixed as we imagine it to be. Every moment is an opportunity to begin again. New Year's Eve is one of these threshold moments. The whole world pauses, briefly, to acknowledge that something is ending and something else is beginning. But the truth is, every moment is New Year's Eve. Every breath is a threshold. Every present moment is the space between what was and what will be. And in that space, there's freedom. So what I'm inviting you to do now is to fully participate in what's about to happen. If you're able, find a comfortable position where you can stay for the next 15 or 20 minutes. If you're sitting, let your back be supported but upright enough that you won't drift into sleep. If you're lying down, that's fine too. Just stay present as much as you can. If you're in a place where you can close your eyes, do that. If not, just soften your gaze. Let it rest on something neutral. This isn't a performance. You don't have to do this perfectly. You're not being graded on your meditation skills. This is just an invitation to be here, fully, for a little while. To stop rushing forward or pulling backward and to simply rest in what is. Take a moment right now to settle. Feel your body making contact with whatever is supporting it. The chair, the bed, the floor. Notice the temperature of the air around you. Notice any sounds that are present. You don't have to do anything about them. Just notice they're there. And notice your breathing. Not trying to change it, not trying to make it deeper or slower or different than it is. Just noticing that breathing is happening. The body knows how to breathe. It's been doing it since the moment you were born. You don't have to manage it. You can just let it be. Good. Now I'm going to ask you to use your imagination in a very specific way. The Buddha often taught through imagery, through inviting people to visualize something that would help them understand truth directly rather than just intellectually. So I'm going to guide you through a visualization, and I invite you to make it as real as you can. Really feel it in your body. Let it be an actual experience, not just a concept. Are you ready? Imagine that you're standing. Even if you're sitting or lying down right now, imagine that you're standing on solid ground. Feel your feet on the earth. Feel the weight of your body being held by the ground beneath you. And now, imagine that in each hand, you're holding a shopping bag. These aren't small bags. They're large, sturdy bags with handles, the kind you'd use to carry heavy groceries a long distance. And they are heavy. In your left hand, feel the weight of the bag pulling down on your arm. Feel how your fingers are wrapped around the handle. Feel the strain in your left wrist, your left forearm, your left shoulder from holding this weight. This bag in your left hand is filled with the past. Everything you remember, every experience you've had, every version of yourself you've been, every relationship that's shaped you, every hurt you've carried, every joy you've known, good memories and painful ones, moments of pride and moments of shame. Everything that's already happened, packed into this bag, and you've been carrying it for so long that you barely remember what it feels like not to hold it. Feel that weight in your left hand. Really feel it. The ache in your shoulder, the tiredness in your arm, the way your whole left side is pulled down by the heaviness of everything that's behind you. And now feel the bag in your right hand. This one is just as heavy, maybe even heavier. Your right fingers are gripping the handle so tightly that your knuckles might be white. Your right wrist is straining. Your right shoulder is pulled down toward the ground. This bag in your right hand is filled with the future. All your plans, all your worries, all your hopes and fears about what's coming, every decision you need to make, every responsibility you're carrying, every anxiety about whether things will turn out okay. dreams and dreads, all mixed together, packed into this bag, and you've been holding it out in front of you like a shield or a burden or both. Feel that weight in your right hand, the tension in your grip, the exhaustion of holding on so tightly, the way your whole right side is pulled down by the weight of everything you're anticipating, everything you're trying to prepare for. And now feel both bags at once. Left hand, the past. Right hand, the future. Both so heavy that your arms ache. Your shoulders hurt. Your whole body is tired from carrying these weights for so long. You've been holding them through every moment of every day. You've never put them down, not really, not completely. You take them to bed with you. You wake up with them still in your hands. You carry them through breakfast, through work, through every conversation, through every quiet moment. And you're so tired. Feel that exhaustion. Not just physical tiredness, but the deep weariness of carrying time itself, of never being able to set down the past or the future, and just be here, just be now, without all this weight. The Buddha taught that this is what human beings do. This is the core of suffering, carrying what doesn't need to be carried in this moment. But he also taught that you can put it down. Not forever, not in some permanent way where you never think about past or future again. But right now, in this moment, you can set these bags down and rest. So let's do that. Start with the left hand, the bag filled with the past. Begin to lean slightly to your left. Imagine yourself bending at the waist, slowly, carefully, lowering the bag in your left hand toward the ground. And as the bag gets closer to the ground, something remarkable happens. The weight begins to disappear. As the bag makes contact with the ground, it's suddenly supported by something other than you. The ground holds it. The earth takes the weight. And you can let go of the handle. Let your left fingers uncurl from around that handle, one finger at a time if you need to. Just release your grip. And when you've let go completely, bring your left hand up by your side. Feel the lightness in your left arm now that it's not carrying anything. Feel your left shoulder drop. Relax. Release the tension it's been holding. The bag is still there. The past hasn't disappeared. You can see it there on the ground beside you, but you're not holding it anymore. And that makes all the difference. Now the right hand, the bag filled with the future. This one might feel harder to put down. The mind might want to tell you that you need to keep holding it, that if you let go even for a moment, everything will fall apart. But just for now, just for these few minutes, you can set it down. Begin to lean to your right. Slowly lower the bag in your right hand toward the ground. And again, as the bag approaches the ground, the weight begins to transfer. The earth rises up to meet it. The ground takes the burden. Let the bag touch down, and then let go of the handle. Uncurl your right fingers. Release your grip on the future. Let your right hand come up by your side. Feel the lightness in your right arm. Feel your right shoulder drop and release. Feel the tension draining away now that you're not holding on so tightly to what hasn't happened yet. Both bags are on the ground now. The past on your left, the future on your right, and you're standing between them in a space that has no name except now. This is the present moment. Not empty, not nothing, but spacious in a way that's impossible when you're carrying the weight of all time. Feel what it's like to be here without holding anything. Your arms hang naturally by your sides. Your shoulders are soft. Your breath moves freely through your chest without the constriction of all that carrying. You're just here, not rushing toward the future, not pulling backward into the past, just standing in this one moment, this one breath, this one instant of being alive. The Buddha said something about this present moment. He said, "Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." Not because the present is always pleasant. Sometimes it's not. But because it's the only moment where peace is actually available. The only moment where you have any real choice. The only moment that's actually happening. The past is memory. The future is imagination. Both are thoughts, not reality. But this moment where you're standing without carrying anything, this is real. And when you're fully here, something becomes clear that's hidden when you're lost in time. You're okay. Right now, in this moment, you're okay. Nothing needs to be fixed immediately. Nothing needs to be figured out in the next 60 seconds. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are right now. You can just be. Let yourself rest here for a few moments. No agenda, no goal, nothing to achieve or become. Just the simple fact of being alive in this moment. Notice your breathing again. In and out, rising and falling. The body doing what it knows how to do without any effort from you. Notice any sounds that are present, near or far, loud or soft, just sounds moving through the space around you. Notice the feeling of being held by whatever is supporting your body right now. The chair, the floor, the bed. You don't have to hold yourself up. You're being held. This is what it means to be present. Not doing anything special. Not achieving some elevated state. Just being here with what is, exactly as it is, without needing it to be different. And here's what's beautiful about being in the present moment. You don't have to be perfect to be here. Think about trees in a forest. The ones that are most striking, most memorable, are often the ones that are twisted or bent or broken by storms and still growing. A perfectly straight tree is fine, but it doesn't catch your attention the way a tree that survived does. The twisted trees have character. They have a story written into their shape. They're beautiful not in spite of being bent, but because of it. You're like that tree. Everything you've been through has shaped you. The difficulties bent you, but didn't break you. You're still here, still growing, still reaching toward light, even when the wind has pushed you in directions you didn't choose. You don't have to be straight and perfect to be beautiful. You don't have to be undamaged to be worthy of this moment of peace. You're enough, exactly as you are, right now. And this moment, this ordinary, imperfect, completely real moment, this is where your whole life is actually happening. Not in the past you've put down, not in the future you've released, but here, now, in this present instant that keeps arriving fresh with every breath. The Buddha taught that the present moment is where transformation happens. Not through planning how you'll be different in the future, not through reviewing how you were different in the past, but through being fully present with what is right now. Because this moment is where your future is actually being made. Every moment of presence, every moment of choosing to be here instead of lost in time, is planting seeds for future moments. You're training your nervous system to know that it's safe to be here. You're teaching your mind that it doesn't have to be somewhere else to be okay. You're creating new patterns that will make it easier to find your way back here next time you get lost. This isn't wasted time. This is the most important work you can do. Stay here just a little longer. Breathing in, knowing you're breathing in. Breathing out, knowing you're breathing out. Present with whatever sensations are arising in your body right now. Not judging them as good or bad. Just noticing, this is what being alive feels like in this moment. And when you're ready, not rushed, but when you feel ready, you can begin to return. The bags are still there on the ground beside you. The past on your left, the future on your right. They haven't disappeared. You'll pick them up again when you need to. You'll use what you've learned from the past. You'll plan for what's coming in the future. But now you know something you didn't know before. You know how to put them down. You know what it feels like to stand without carrying all that weight. And you can come back to this feeling anytime. Anytime the burden gets too heavy. Anytime you're too lost in time to be present with your life. You can remember this moment. You can imagine setting down the bags. You can feel your shoulders drop. You can return to now. Begin to deepen your breath a little. if your breathing has gotten very soft. Begin to bring small movements back into your body, maybe wiggling your fingers or toes, rolling your shoulders, whatever feels right. And when you're ready, if your eyes have been closed, you can open them. Welcome back. Notice how you feel. You might feel lighter, more spacious, calmer than when we started. Or you might feel emotional. Sometimes putting things down brings up feelings that were hidden under the busyness of carrying. Whatever you're feeling is exactly right. There's no correct response to presence. But I want you to notice something important. You're still here. You put down the past and the future for a little while, and you didn't disappear. Your life didn't fall apart. You were okay, more than okay, in the present moment. This is the teaching at the heart of all Buddhist practice. Peace doesn't exist in the past or the future. It exists here, now, in the present moment, when you're not adding extra suffering to whatever you're experiencing. The past exists only in thought. Memory is a thought about what happened. And when you're lost in that thought, you're not here. The future exists only in thought. Planning, worrying, anticipating, all thoughts about what might happen. And when you're lost in those thoughts, you're not here. But here, this moment where your body is breathing and your heart is beating and you're aware of being alive. This is real. And this is where peace lives. Now, the mind might want to make this complicated. It might want to turn this into something you have to be good at, something you have to practice perfectly, something else to add to your list of things to worry about doing correctly. But it's not complicated. It's just this. When you notice you're lost in past or future, you can come back to now. When you notice you're carrying weight that doesn't need to be carried in this moment, you can set it down. Not once and for all in some grand gesture, but moment by moment, breath by breath, one choice at a time, to be here instead of somewhere else. The Buddha built an entire path of practice on this simple truth. Not by planning elaborately for enlightenment, not by dwelling on past mistakes or past achievements, but by being present with each moment as it arose. And in that presence, moment after moment after moment, he created a life and a teaching that's touched millions of people across thousands of years. He didn't do it by carrying the future. He did it by showing up fully for each present moment and trusting that each moment, well lived, would become a foundation for the next one. That's the paradox at the heart of this teaching. The way to create a better future isn't to spend all your time planning and worrying about the future. It's to be fully present right now. Because right now is where your actions happen. Right now is where your choices are made. Right now is where life is actually being lived. And when you're present, when you're not distracted by carrying the weight of all time, you make better choices. You see more clearly. You respond rather than react. You create conditions for good things to unfold. Instead of being so focused on preventing bad things, that you miss the possibilities right in front of you. This isn't just philosophy. This is how communities get built, how relationships deepen, how work gets done that actually matters. Moment by moment, one present moment at a time, not by grand plans, but by showing up fully for what's here now. So as we move forward into the next part of this journey together, I want you to carry this experience with you. Not as a memory of something nice that happened once, but as a skill you can return to any time. You know now what it feels like to put down the bags. You know what it feels like to stand in the present moment without the weight of all time on your shoulders. And whenever you need to, you can come back here. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine lowering the bags to the ground. Feel your shoulders drop. Notice your breath. And there you are, present, here, now. That's the practice. Not complicated, but profound. Not easy, but possible. Not something you achieve once, but something you return to again and again and again. And each time you return, you're training yourself to live more fully, more freely, with less unnecessary suffering weighing you down. Stay with me. There's more to explore about how to carry this practice into daily life, how to remember it when you most need it, how to build a life that's organized around presence instead of around the exhausting work of carrying time. But for now, just rest in this. You put down the bags. You're still here. You're okay. And that simple truth is the beginning of everything. You've experienced what it feels like to put down the weight of time, to stand in the present moment without carrying past and future. Now comes the question that matters most. How do you actually live this? Because it's one thing to feel peace during a guided meditation. It's another thing entirely to remember that peace when you're stuck in traffic, or facing a deadline, or dealing with a difficult relationship, or lying awake at 3 a.m. with your mind spinning. The Buddha didn't teach meditation as an escape from life. He taught it as preparation for life, as a way of training attention so that when life gets difficult, and it will get difficult, you have somewhere to stand besides panic or despair. So let's talk about building a life in the present. Not a perfect life. Not a life where you never get lost in past or future again, but a life that's organized around presence as the foundation, instead of as an occasional break from the real work of planning and remembering. The first thing to understand is that presence isn't about you becoming special. There's a particular trap that spiritual practice can create. It's subtle, but it's powerful. When someone begins to experience the benefits of meditation or mindfulness or any contemplative practice, the ego can quietly take credit for it. I'm good at this, it whispers. I'm becoming enlightened. I'm more aware than other people. I'm special because I practice. And suddenly, spiritual practice becomes another way to build an identity, another thing to be proud of, another burden to carry. The Buddha taught extensively about this trap. He called it spiritual materialism, the tendency to accumulate spiritual achievements, the same way people accumulate possessions. He told stories about monks who became proud of their meditation abilities, who looked down on others, who hadn't achieved the same states, who thought enlightenment was something they personally owned. And he said, "This is the opposite of freedom. Because the moment you think, I am someone who is present, or I am someone who is enlightened, you've created a new burden to defend. Now you have to maintain that identity. You have to prove it to yourself and others. You have to be consistently present, consistently wise, consistently peaceful, or face the terror that you might lose this special status you've worked so hard to achieve." This is exhausting. The Buddha taught something radical about this. He taught that there is no permanent, unchanging self to be special in the first place. Not as nihilism, not as you don't exist, but as freedom from having to constantly construct and defend an identity. When teachers give teachings, the teachings don't belong to them personally. They're passing on what they received from their teachers, who received it from their teachers, going back through lineages that stretch across centuries. The Dhamma, the truth of how things work, is a system, not a personality. It doesn't matter who speaks it. It doesn't matter who practices it. What matters is whether it's true, whether it works, whether it leads to less suffering and more freedom. So when you experience moments of genuine presence, when you manage to put down the bags and stand in the present moment, that's not you being special. That's just what happens when conditions align in a particular way. When attention is trained properly, when the teachings are applied, when you stop adding extra suffering to whatever you're experiencing. You don't have to carry the burden of being someone special who achieved something. You just have to keep showing up, keep practicing, keep returning to presence when you get lost. That's it. This understanding actually makes everything easier. When you're not trying to maintain some identity as an enlightened or present person, you can be honest about when you're lost. You can be humble about what you don't know. You can keep learning instead of defending what you think you've already mastered. And ironically, that humility, that willingness to not be special, is what actually allows wisdom to flow through you. Because you're not in the way anymore. You're not trying to make the teachings about you. You're just a vehicle for something much larger than yourself. The Buddha said, "The way is not in the sky. The way is in the heart." Not in achieving some elevated state above human experience, not in becoming someone extraordinary who transcends ordinary life, but in being fully present with your actual human heart in this moment, exactly as it is. This brings us to something crucial about how to actually live in the present moment, the difference between planning and presence. Most people think these are opposites. That being present means never thinking about the future, never making plans, just floating through life, reacting to whatever happens. But that's not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha made plans. He organized his community of monks and nuns. He considered where to teach and when. He gave detailed instructions about how to live ethically, how to practice, how to build a sustainable spiritual community. But there's a profound difference between wise preparation and the kind of obsessive planning that most people do. Wise preparation uses past experience to inform future action. It looks at what's needed and takes practical steps, but it doesn't try to control outcomes. It doesn't grip the future tightly and demand that it unfold exactly as planned. Most planning is actually worry dressed up as productivity. People make elaborate plans not because the plans are necessary, but because planning gives the illusion of control. If they can just think through every possibility, anticipate every problem, prepare for every contingency, then maybe they can prevent suffering, avoid failure, guarantee success. But life doesn't work that way. Think about the year 2000, when the world was convinced that computer systems would fail at midnight on New Year's Eve. The Y2K bug was going to crash everything: banking systems, power grids, hospitals, governments. People spent years preparing for this catastrophe. Billions of dollars were invested in fixing code. Some people stockpiled food and water and moved to remote locations to survive what they were sure would be the collapse of modern civilization. And then midnight came, and nothing happened. The computers kept running. The lights stayed on. Life continued exactly as it had before. Now, some of that preparation was probably useful. The code that got fixed, the systems that got updated. But the panic, the obsessive worry, the years of anxiety about something that ended up being manageable, that was suffering that didn't need to exist. This is what happens when we confuse preparation with control. Preparation says, "Here's what's needed. Let me take care of it." Then it returns to the present moment. Control says, "I must think through every possible scenario and protect against every possible threat, and I can never stop thinking about it, or something terrible will happen." One is wisdom. The other is suffering. The Buddha taught about this in terms of right effort. There's a kind of striving that's helpful. The effort to be present, to act ethically, to practice with dedication. But there's also a kind of striving that creates suffering. The effort to make reality be different than it is, to control what can't be controlled, to eliminate uncertainty through sheer force of will. Learning to tell the difference is the practice. Here's what it looks like in practice. When you're facing something challenging, a difficult conversation, a major decision, an uncertain situation, you can prepare wisely without trying to control the outcome. You can think through what you want to say, what your values are, what matters most to you. You can gather information you need. You can clarify your intention. And then you can show up, not with a script, that demands everything go exactly as you planned. But with presence, the ability to respond to what's actually happening instead of to what you imagined would happen. Some of the most powerful moments in life happen when we let go of the script and trust ourselves to respond to the moment. When we stop trying to force the conversation to go a particular direction and actually listen to what the other person is saying. When we stop reciting our prepared speech and speak from what's true right now. When we stop defending our plan and respond to what's actually needed. This isn't carelessness. It's actually the opposite. It's paying such careful attention to reality as it unfolds that you can respond skillfully instead of just reacting from habit or fear. The Buddha called this samavayama, right effort, wise effort, effort that's aligned with how things actually work instead of how we wish they worked. And what he taught is that this kind of presence-based response actually creates better outcomes than rigid planning. Not because presence is magic, but because when you're present, you have access to information that planning doesn't have. What's actually happening right now, what's actually needed in this specific moment, what possibilities are opening up that you couldn't have predicted. When you're lost in your plan, you miss all of that. You're so busy trying to make reality match your expectations that you can't see what reality is actually offering. Life has a kind of intelligence to it. Not intelligent design in some theological sense, but resilience, adaptability, the ability to find ways forward that our limited planning minds can't foresee. When we stop gripping so tightly, when we stop demanding that everything unfold exactly as we think it should, we give life room to surprise us. Sometimes the surprise is difficult. Things don't go the way we wanted, and we have to adapt. But sometimes the surprise is that the path forward was easier than we thought, that help came from unexpected places, that what we were so afraid of turned out to be manageable. We can't know ahead of time. That's the nature of living in time, in uncertainty, in a reality we don't fully control. But we can show up present for whatever unfolds. And that presence makes us infinitely more capable than any amount of anxious planning ever could. Now, you might be wondering, if presence is so valuable, how does it spread? How does this practice move beyond individual people to create communities, to create culture, to create change in the world? This is something the Buddha understood deeply. He didn't build his teaching on hierarchy or authority. He didn't say, "I am special, worship me, build monuments to me." He said, "I've found something that works. Here's how to practice it. Try it for yourself. See if it leads to less suffering. If it does, share it with others." And that's how it spread. Not through conquest or conversion or evangelism, but through people experiencing the benefits of the practice and naturally wanting to share it with people they cared about. Communities formed around this practice, not because someone built impressive buildings or created elaborate hierarchies, but because people gathered together to support each other in remembering what matters, virtue, peace, compassion. The buildings came later, as expressions of gratitude, as practical spaces for practice. But what was spreading wasn't buildings. It was the practice itself. Today, Buddhist communities exist all over the world, in cultures that are completely different from the India where the Buddha taught, in languages he never spoke, in forms he never imagined. But the essence is the same, people gathering to support each other, in being present, in acting ethically, in responding to life with wisdom and compassion, instead of with reactivity and fear. Sometimes people think they need to go to a monastery or a temple to practice. They think peace exists only in special places set aside for spirituality. But the Buddha taught that you carry the temple with you. Every moment you choose presence over distraction, that's temple. Every moment you choose kindness over reactivity, that's temple. Every moment you remember to put down the bags and stand in the present, that's temple. The physical spaces are helpful. They remind us what we're doing. They provide support and community. They protect the teachings so they can be passed on to future generations. But they're not necessary for practice. You can be standing in line at the grocery store and be completely present with the experience of standing, breathing, waiting. That's practice. You can be washing dishes and be fully present with the sensation of warm water, the smell of soap, the rhythm of the work. That's practice. You can be listening to someone speak and be completely present with listening, not planning your response, not judging what they're saying, just listening. That's practice. This is how the teaching spreads most powerfully, not through impressive institutions, but through individuals who embody presence in ordinary moments. When someone encounters a person who is truly present, who isn't rushing through the interaction to get to the next thing, who isn't distracted or defensive or performing, they feel it. They might not know what's different about that person. They might not have language for it, but they feel the quality of that presence, and something in them recognizes it as what they've been seeking. That's how communities form around this practice. Not through marketing or recruitment, but through people experiencing the quality of presence in someone else and wanting to understand how to cultivate it themselves. In this way, every moment of genuine presence is an act of teaching. Every time you choose to be here instead of lost in past or future, you're demonstrating what's possible. You're creating a small ripple of peace in the world. And those ripples spread in ways you'll never see or know about. The person you were patient with might be patient with someone else later. The person who felt truly listened to might listen more carefully to the next person they encounter. The peace you embody might remind someone else that peace is possible. This is what the Buddha meant when he talked about being a lamp unto yourself. Not that you light yourself on fire trying to illuminate everything, but that your presence, your embodied, ordinary, moment-by-moment practice of being here naturally radiates outward and affects everything around you. You don't have to be perfect at this. You don't have to achieve some enlightened state. before you're allowed to practice or share the practice. You just have to be honest about where you are and keep showing up. Keep returning to presence when you notice you've gotten lost. Keep putting down the bags when you notice you're carrying too much. Keep choosing kindness when your default is reactivity. Keep choosing presence when your habit is distraction. That's enough. That's more than enough. Because every moment of practice is both caring for yourself and caring for the world. Every moment you're less reactive is a moment when someone else doesn't have to absorb your reactivity. Every moment you're present is a moment when presence becomes a little more available in the collective human experience. This is how you build a life in the present, not as a solo achievement, but as part of a web of practice that extends across time and space, connecting you to everyone who has ever made this choice to be here, now, as fully as they could. So the question becomes, how do we actually live this every single day? How do we remember to put down the bags when the weight gets so normal we forget we're carrying it? How do we choose presence when distraction is so much easier? How do we keep practicing when we keep forgetting? That's what we're going to explore next. Not as some elaborate system or complicated technique, but as simple practices you can weave into ordinary life. Practices that don't require you to be special or enlightened or different than you are. Practices that work with your actual human life exactly as it is. Because that's where freedom lives, not in some elevated state you achieve someday, but in the ordinary moments you're already living when you remember to be present with them. Stay with me. We're going to make this as practical and usable as possible. Because the teachings aren't meant to be beautiful ideas you think about. They're meant to be lived practices that change how you move through the world. And you're ready for that now. You've experienced presence. You've felt what it's like to put down the weight. Now let's talk about how to remember that experience when you need it most. The Buddha didn't teach meditation as something separate from daily life. He taught it as training for daily life, a way of learning to be present that would naturally extend into every moment, every interaction, every ordinary task. Because here's the truth. You can have profound experiences in meditation and still spend the rest of your day lost in reactivity, distraction, and suffering. What matters isn't how peaceful you feel sitting still with your eyes closed. What matters is whether that peace is available when your child is screaming, when your deadline is looming, when life is being life in all its unpredictable intensity. So let's talk about practices you can actually use. Not elaborate rituals that require special conditions, but simple, practical ways to return to presence in the moments when you most need it. The most important moment of your entire day happens before you're even fully awake. There's a space between sleeping and waking, where consciousness is returning, but the mind hasn't started its usual chatter yet. In that space, you have a choice. You can reach immediately for your phone, filling your barely awake mind with other people's urgency, the news cycle, the endless scroll of everything that's wrong in the world. Or you can take 3 breaths, Just 3 conscious breaths before you do anything else. Breathing in, knowing you're breathing in. Breathing out, knowing you're breathing out. That's it. No special technique. Just 3 breaths where you're present with the simple fact of being alive. Those 3 breaths set the tone for your entire day. After those 3 breaths, before you get out of bed, you can do an abbreviated version of the shopping bags practice. Feel your body lying in bed. Notice where it makes contact with the mattress. And then ask yourself, what am I already carrying this morning? You might notice your mind is already reaching back to yesterday or reaching forward to today's tasks. Just notice that reaching, you don't have to fight it. Just notice, oh, I'm already picking up the bags. And then, consciously, imagine setting them down. You can start the day unburdened. Then, as you're getting ready to meet the day, you can set an intention. The Buddha taught about intentions as the seeds of action. What you intend shapes what you notice, and what you notice shapes how you respond. You don't have to make this complicated. Maybe your intention is virtue, to act in ways you can be proud of, to be trustworthy. Maybe your intention is peace, to respond rather than react, to bring calm instead of adding to chaos. Maybe your intention is compassion, to remember that everyone you encounter is struggling with something, to be kind even when you don't feel like it. The power is in the act of consciously choosing what you want to orient toward before the day's momentum carries you in whatever direction your habits would take you. This morning practice takes maybe 5 minutes total. 3 breaths, a moment of noticing what you're carrying, a brief intention setting. But those 5 minutes change everything that follows. Then, throughout the day, the practice is to notice what's actually happening instead of only what's wrong. Remember the teaching about the 2 bad bricks, the brain's automatic tendency to focus on problems while barely registering what's working. This is a pattern that runs deep, that will keep showing up no matter how much you practice. But you can catch it. You can learn to notice when your attention has narrowed, to focus only on what's broken, what's missing, what's wrong. And when you catch it, you can consciously widen the lens. Let's say something goes wrong at work. A project hits a snag. You make a mistake that requires fixing. The untrained mind immediately spirals. This is a disaster. I'm incompetent. Everything is falling apart. But you can notice that spiral starting. You can feel it in your body, the tightening in your chest, the way your breathing gets shallow. And you can pause. Not to deny that there's a problem. There is a problem, and it needs addressing. But to see the whole picture instead of just the problem. What else is true right now? Maybe there are 10 other projects that are going fine. Maybe this mistake is fixable. Maybe you've handled situations like this before. Maybe this difficulty is revealing something useful about the system that needed to be revealed. This isn't forced positive thinking. This is accurate. Seeing all 998 good bricks alongside the 2 crooked ones. The Buddha said, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts we make the world." He meant that the quality of your thinking shapes the quality of your experience. If your thinking is constantly focused on problems, your experience of life will be that everything is a problem. If your thinking can hold both problems and everything else that's true, your experience of life becomes workable, even when things are difficult. So throughout the day, practice catching the mind in the act of narrowing. When you notice you're only seeing what's wrong, pause and ask, what else is true? When you notice you're catastrophizing about one difficulty, pause and ask, what's actually working right now? This practice of actively looking for what's working doesn't make problems disappear, but it trains your attention to see reality more completely, instead of through the distorted lens of negativity bias. And here's something interesting that starts to happen when you practice this consistently. When difficulties arise, you begin to ask a different question. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, what's useful about this? Not in a toxic positivity way where you pretend everything is a gift, but in a genuine curiosity about what this difficulty might be revealing, what it might be teaching. In nature, what looks like waste from one perspective is resource from another. Fallen leaves aren't trash, they're food for the soil. What decomposes in one place nourishes growth in another. Your difficulties work the same way. The job you lost might force you into work that's actually better suited to who you are. The relationship that ended might teach you things about yourself that no successful relationship ever could. You can't always see this in the moment. Sometimes you need distance and time before the usefulness of a difficulty becomes clear. But you can practice holding the possibility that even this hard thing might not be purely loss. That something useful might be composting here, even if you can't see the new growth yet. This isn't about making yourself feel better. It's about staying open instead of shutting down, staying curious instead of collapsing into despair. So throughout the day, practice this kind of attention. Notice when you're spiraling into everything is terrible. Notice when you're magnifying one problem into proof of total failure. And then, gently, widen the lens. What else is true? What's working alongside what's not? What might I be learning here? That's the practice. Then, at the end of the day, there's another opportunity to practice the space before sleep. Many people have been taught to keep gratitude journals, to list 3 or 5 things they're grateful for each day. This can be useful, but it can also become mechanical, forced, a spiritual chore you do to prove you're doing self-improvement correctly. The Buddha didn't teach forced gratitude. He taught honest seeing. So instead of forcing yourself to feel grateful for things you don't actually feel grateful for, try this. Before you go to sleep, review your day the way you might review a movie you just watched. Not judging whether it was good or bad, just noticing what happened. That was hard. That was good. That was interesting. That surprised me. That hurt. That made me laugh. You're not trying to make the hard things not count, or the good things be more important than they were. You're just acknowledging the full range of what actually happened. This is what the Buddha meant by right view, seeing things as they are, not as you wish they were. And then, before sleep, you can do the shopping bags practice one more time. Lying in bed, imagine putting down everything that happened today, not denying it, but releasing your grip on it so you can actually rest. The day is over. It already happened. You can't change any of it now. Holding on to it through the night doesn't make it better. It just means you can't sleep. So put it down. Lower the bag to the ground. Feel your grip loosen. Let your body settle into the bed without carrying the weight of the entire day through the night. This simple practice, 3 breaths in the morning, noticing throughout the day, reviewing before sleep, creates a structure that makes presence possible even in the chaos of ordinary life. But there's one more practice that might be the hardest of all. The practice of extending to yourself the same compassion you're learning to extend to others. Remember the teaching about the 2 bad bricks? Most people do this to themselves more harshly than they do it to anything else. They can see 998 good things in a friend and focus lovingly on helping with the 2 that aren't working. But when they look at themselves, they see only 2 bad bricks and genuinely believe the whole wall should be torn down. The Buddha taught extensively about metta, loving kindness, the practice of wishing well-being for all creatures. But he said to start with yourself. Not because you're more important than others, but because if you can't extend kindness to yourself, your kindness to others will eventually become depleting. Most people misunderstand self-compassion. They think it means letting yourself off the hook or being self-indulgent. But that's not what it means. Self-compassion means seeing yourself as clearly as you see others, with all your imperfections, with all your struggles, and treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer someone you love who was going through what you're going through. It means acknowledging when you made a mistake without making it mean you're a terrible person. It means recognizing when you're struggling without adding judgment about how you should be handling it better. It means seeing your imperfections the way you see the twisted trees in a forest, not as flaws that make you worthless, but as evidence that you've weathered storms and are still growing. The trees that are most beautiful are often the ones that are bent and weathered, the ones with character, with a story written into their shape. You are that tree. Your imperfections aren't mistakes in your design. They're your features. They're proof that you've actually lived, that you've survived difficulties that could have broken you. When you look at someone else struggling, you probably think, they're doing their best. This is hard. They deserve compassion. When you look at yourself struggling, you probably think, I should be better at this. What's wrong with me? But why? Why do you deserve less compassion than anyone else? The Buddha taught that all beings are worthy of loving kindness, not just the ones who are perfect. All beings, including you. You don't have to earn the right to be kind to yourself. You don't have to fix yourself first. You can offer yourself compassion right now, exactly as you are. So here's the practice. When you notice you're being hard on yourself, when you catch yourself in harsh self-judgment, pause. Put your hand on your heart if that feels comfortable. Feel your breath moving in your chest. And say to yourself what you would say to someone you love who was suffering. Maybe it's, "This is hard, and I'm doing my best." Maybe it's, "I'm learning, and learning includes making mistakes." Maybe it's, "I deserve kindness, especially from myself." Maybe it's just, "May I be at peace." The words don't matter as much as the quality of attention you're bringing, the willingness to meet yourself with gentleness instead of harshness. This isn't indulgent. This is necessary. Because when you're constantly at war with yourself, you don't have energy for anything else. You're so busy defending against your own attacks that you can't show up fully for your life. But when you can extend compassion to yourself, when you can look at your imperfections and see them as features instead of flaws, something relaxes. You stop using so much energy fighting with who you are. And in that relaxation, you become more available for everything else. More available to be present with others. More available to respond skillfully to difficulty. More available to notice beauty when it appears. These practices, morning, throughout the day, evening, and self-compassion, they're not complicated. 3 breaths when you wake up. Noticing throughout the day when you're narrowing to see only problems. Reviewing before sleep, without forcing gratitude. Extending kindness to yourself when you notice harsh judgment. Simple practices that don't require special conditions or large amounts of time. But practiced consistently, they completely change your relationship with your life. Because presence isn't something you achieve once and then have forever. It's something you return to again and again in small moments throughout ordinary days. And each time you return, you're training yourself to live with less unnecessary suffering, more availability for what matters, and a quality of attention that makes peace possible even in difficulty. That's the path. Not dramatic, but profound. Not easy, but absolutely possible. One present moment at a time. There's something humanity does at the turning of a calendar year that might seem irrational if you think about it too carefully. We mark the passage from December 31st to January 1st as though something fundamental has changed, as though the universe itself has reset, as though we get a clean slate simply because the number on the calendar is different. And objectively, that's absurd. The earth doesn't care about our calendars. Time doesn't actually stop and start based on arbitrary human conventions about when a year begins. Nothing is different on January 1st than it was on December 31st, except the date we write on checks. And yet, there's power in these arbitrary markers, not because they change reality, but because they change our attention. They create a pause, a threshold, a moment where we collectively agree to stop and take stock before moving forward. The Buddha understood this about human psychology. He created specific times for reflection, for renewal of commitment, for letting go of what no longer serves. Not because certain days are inherently more sacred than others, but because human minds need markers. We need ceremonies that give us permission to release, to begin again, to remember what matters. New Year's Eve is one of these markers. But here's what most people misunderstand about it. They think New Year's is about the future, about resolutions, goals, plans for who you're going to become in the year ahead. And so they spend the threshold moment doing exactly what causes suffering, carrying the future, gripping it tightly, demanding that the next 365 days unfold according to their plan. By February, most of those resolutions are abandoned, not because people lack willpower, but because the resolutions were based on the fantasy that you can control the future through sheer determination. The Buddha taught something different about thresholds like New Year's. He taught that they're opportunities to release, not to grip more tightly. New Year's isn't about carrying more into the future. It's about putting down what you've been carrying from the past. All the disappointments of the year that just ended. All the versions of yourself you thought you should have been by now. All the goals you didn't meet. The relationships that didn't work out. The opportunities you missed. The ways you fell short of your own expectations. That's what you release at the threshold. Not because those things don't matter, but because carrying them into the next moment doesn't serve you. The past happened. You learnt from it, or you didn't. You grew from it, or you're still processing it. But either way, you don't need to carry it as a burden into every future moment. So the real power of New Year's isn't in making resolutions about the future. It's in consciously putting down the past before you take the next step forward. The Buddha said something that speaks directly to this. He said, "Every morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters most." Every morning. Not every January 1st, not every birthday, or anniversary, or special occasion. Every single morning, every single moment you wake to consciousness, you have the opportunity to begin again. The fresh start isn't granted by the calendar. It's available right now, in this moment, simply by choosing to put down what you've been carrying and be present with what is. New Year's Eve just gives you social permission to do what you could do any moment, to pause, to reflect, to release, to set down the bags and stand in the present before picking up what you actually need for the road ahead. And there's something powerful about doing this collectively, about knowing that all around the world, millions of people are pausing at the same threshold, taking the same breath between what was and what's coming. That collective pause creates a field of possibility. It reminds us that we're not alone in this practice of trying to live more consciously, more presently, with less unnecessary suffering. In Buddhist communities, threshold moments like New Year's often include blessings. Not blessings in the sense of asking some external deity to grant favors, but blessings as a form of intention setting, a way of consciously directing your attention toward what you want to cultivate in yourself and in the world. These blessings often use traditional language, sometimes Pali, the language the Buddha spoke, sometimes Sanskrit, sometimes the local language of wherever Buddhism has taken root. The specific words matter less than the act itself, the act of pausing to name what you value, what you want to protect, what you hope to bring into being through your actions. Traditional Buddhist blessings often focus on the three qualities we've been exploring throughout this entire journey: virtue, peace, and compassion. When Buddhists bless themselves or others, they're not asking for material success, or for life to be easy, or for everything to go according to plan. They're blessing the capacity to act with integrity even when it's difficult, the capacity to remain at peace internally even when external circumstances are chaotic, the capacity to respond to suffering, their own and others, with wisdom and compassion instead of with reactivity or avoidance. These blessings often include phrases about safety and protection, about being free from danger, free from mental suffering, free from physical suffering. But the protection being invoked isn't some magical shield. It's the protection that comes from living skillfully, from making choices that create safety rather than harm, peace rather than conflict, connection rather than isolation. When you bless yourself with freedom from mental suffering, you're not asking the universe to remove all difficult emotions from your life. You're setting an intention to practice in ways that don't add unnecessary suffering to the inevitable pain of being human. When you bless yourself with peace, you're not asking for life to stop being challenging. You're committing to cultivate the inner stability that allows you to meet challenges without fragmenting, without losing yourself in reactivity. When you bless yourself and others with compassion, you're acknowledging that everyone is struggling with something, and you're choosing to respond to that struggle with kindness, rather than with judgment or indifference. This is what makes blessings different from wishes or goals. A wish is passive. You hope something happens. A goal is about the future. You plan to make something happen. But a blessing is about now. It's an active cultivation of a quality in this present moment, a remembering of what you value, a directing of your attention toward what you want to grow in yourself and in the world around you. In traditional Buddhist ceremonies, blessings are often done in community. Everyone says the words together, or one person speaks them while others listen, and there's a sense of collective intention being set. This matters because it reinforces that you're not doing this practice alone. You're part of a lineage of people who've been trying to live more skillfully, more consciously, with less suffering for thousands of years. And you're part of a community of people alive right now who are also trying to figure out how to be human in ways that create more peace and less harm. So blessing isn't just personal, it's relational. It connects you to something larger than your individual struggle. But you don't need to be in a formal ceremony to offer a blessing. You don't need to know traditional words or be part of an official community. You can create your own blessing right now, in this moment. And what makes a blessing powerful isn't the language you use. It's the sincerity of your intention, the clarity of your attention, the willingness to consciously choose what you want to cultivate instead of just letting habits run your life. So let me offer you an invitation. As we stand here at this threshold, not just the threshold of a new year, but the threshold of this moment, transitioning into the next, you can create your own blessing. Not a goal, not a resolution about who you're going to force yourself to become, but a direction, an intention, a remembering of what matters most to you. You might bless yourself with the remembering to put down the past when it no longer serves you. May I remember that I can release what's already happened. May I remember that I don't have to carry every hurt, every disappointment, every regret into every future moment. May I remember that putting down the past doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means I'm not letting it imprison me. You might bless yourself with the remembering to put down the future when you're gripping it too tightly. May I remember that I can't control outcomes through worry. May I remember that planning is useful but obsessing is suffering. May I remember to prepare wisely and then release my grip, trusting my ability to respond to whatever actually unfolds. You might bless yourself with the remembering to be here, now, in this present moment, where life is actually happening. May I remember that this moment is where peace lives. May I remember that this moment is where my choices are actually made. May I remember that this moment is enough. I don't have to wait until some future moment when everything is finally perfect before I'm allowed to be at peace. These aren't magic words. They don't make difficulty disappear or guarantee that the year ahead will be easy. But they do something important. They focus your attention on what you can actually influence, not what happens to you, but how you meet what happens to you. And over time, repeated attention becomes habit. Repeated intention becomes character. Repeated practice of remembering to be present becomes a life that's actually lived instead of just survived. So as you stand at this threshold, whether it's literally New Year's Eve or just another ordinary moment that you're choosing to make significant through your attention, you can offer yourself this blessing. This is enough. Not in a resigned way, not in a giving up way, but in a way that acknowledges the simple truth that this moment, exactly as it is is the only moment you actually have. You are enough. Not perfect, not finished, not beyond struggle or growth, but enough to be here, to practice, to try, to keep showing up for your life, even when it's hard. This moment is enough. It doesn't need to be different before you're allowed to find peace in it. It doesn't need to be special or significant or different from all the other moments. It just needs to be met with presence, with honesty, with whatever capacity for kindness you can muster right now. That's the blessing, not a promise that everything will work out perfectly, not a guarantee against future suffering, but a remembering that you have what you need to meet this moment, this one right here, right now, with presence and dignity and the courage to keep practicing, even when you keep forgetting. And when you forget, because you will forget, because everyone forgets, you can begin again. Not on January 1st, not on your birthday or at some special ceremonial time, but right now, in this moment, the only moment where beginning again is ever actually possible. So take a breath. Feel yourself here, alive, present with whatever is. And know that you're standing at a threshold, not just between one year and the next, but between this moment and the next one and the next one. Endless thresholds that keep arriving as long as you're alive. Each one an opportunity to put down what you've been carrying. Each one an opportunity to remember what matters. Each one an opportunity to begin again. May you remember to be here. May you remember that you're enough. May you remember that this moment, imperfect and ordinary as it is, contains everything you actually need to practice, to grow, to live with less unnecessary suffering and more genuine peace. That's the blessing. That's what we're standing at the threshold to remember. Not a better future or a different past, but this moment, exactly as it is, met with presence and kindness and the willingness to keep trying. Welcome to the new year. Welcome to the new moment. Welcome to now. We've come to the end of these 3 hours together. And here's what I want you to know as you return to your life. The shopping bags are still there. The past and the future haven't disappeared. You'll pick them up again because you need them. Memory teaches. Planning helps. Thinking about time is part of being human. But now you know something you didn't know before. You know how to put them down. You know what it feels like to stand in the present moment without carrying the weight of all time on your shoulders. And you can return to that feeling anytime you need it. Not as some special meditation practice, but as a simple remembering, oh, I'm carrying too much right now. Let me put it down for a moment. You know about the 2 bad bricks now. You know that your attention will naturally focus on problems, and you can choose to widen the lens to see what else is true. You know about the 3 qualities worth remembering: virtue that creates safety, peace that creates steadiness, compassion that creates connection. These aren't things you learned once, and now you're done. They're practices you'll return to again and again, forgetting and remembering, losing your way, and finding it for as long as you're alive. And that's okay. That's the practice. If this helped today, it will help again tomorrow. The present moment is always here, always waiting for you to remember it exists. So as you step back into your life, carry this with you. You don't need a temple or a special place to practice presence. You carry it inside you. Happy New Year. Happy new moment. Happy now.